Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we're going to take a look at your horoscopes for the month of February, and we will be focusing on the major Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries for all 12 signs. With my friends and colleagues today, we'll be bringing them on in just a moment. That is our agenda for today. So as always, remember to like and subscribe. It really does help our channel to grow. If we have been one of the anchors that you have used to kind of provide some ground and stability for yourself psychically during some really turbulent times recently, or the transits have been intense, but this is a good spot for you, please consider subscribing. It helps us a lot. Transcripts of any of these daily talks can be found on the website. Of course, that's nightlightastrology.com. I'm going to take you over there and remind you of a couple of things happening this month at Nightlight. If you go to live talks under events, I'm giving a talk on February 19th called Psychedelics and Astrology, Why They So Often Intertwine. You can register for that talk, and if you can't attend live, you get the recording. We are in the midst of 40 days of silent meditation practice. This is my way of contributing something peaceful and positive to the world during some really difficult times. At Nightlight, we've been practicing Silent Sundays, so now we're doing it every day for 40 days. You can use the Zoom link to join us Monday through Saturdays, 9:30 a.m. Eastern for 20 minutes of meditation and group. Sundays, we meet 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, 10:30 Central for half an hour of meditation, followed by an open period for reflections and conversation and dialogue, which has been really healing and nice. So come join us. Check that out. It's an excellent way to utilize the energy of this month to also maybe start a spiritual practice if that would be useful for you. It can be very grounding to have a little quiet time every day during times like these. Anyway, if you go over to the courses, third year course starts in this month. That is our course on counseling and Hellenistic astrology. Our guild membership has started recently. It's a kind of advanced Hellenistic study group and practice group. And our masterclass on the decans also recently began. Those are all really good courses you can get in on. It's not too late. There's need-based tuition for all of them. We do have need-based astrology readings you can also check out. I do horary, all good stuff on the website that I hope you'll take some time to visit. Now, let us bring back our panelists, Kelsey, Emily, Mal, Q. Welcome back.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Hey, guys.
It's not like there's anything major happening in the world right now to talk about or to look at the astrology. It's been like, well, 2026 got started, didn't it?
Started with a bang, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have arguably the biggest transit of the year. There are a few, but Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is circled and is like 1A or 1B for most astrologers for the year ahead. I'm going to put this up on the real-time clock really quick here. Let's take a look at it. This will be the focus of our horoscopes for this month, and the panel here will take turns going through it. I'll add some commentary as we go. You can see that February 20th, the two planets will conjoin at 0 Aries. That is a ignition point of the entire zodiac as well, the first degree of the zodiac. Very powerful meeting there. The moon will also be in the sign of Aries on the exact same day. And it's worth mentioning that as that conjunction is happening, we are just days removed from a solar eclipse in Aquarius and just days prior to Mars squaring Uranus. On the day that Mars and Pluto conjoined, Neptune entered Aries in January. So we have another close configuration of Mars to an outer planet when Saturn and Neptune get together in Aries. The beginning of the year is a lot of very intense dynamic energy, in other words, and hopefully what we will do today is ground this for you within your horoscopes and give you something solid and helpful to work with. Before I get into horoscopes, I just want to give maybe an opportunity for all of us on the panel to just, what are your thoughts on Saturn, Neptune, like this archetypal combination? Maybe let's just start with some general thoughts about what we can all look for, and then we'll start refining by going Aries through Pisces. Does that sound okay?
Yeah. I have a thought. I've been thinking a lot about the illusion of separation and how these two planets joining at the first degree of the zodiac is really highlighting our shared humanity during this time. And regardless of where you're at on the globe, there's this feeling of oneness, but it's shifting from this thoughts and prayers attitude to let's do something with Aries.
Love the way you put that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of this as, sorry, I'm a little under the weather, so if you can hear my voice. I'm thinking of this as like the dissolving of boundaries. I know it's been referenced many times. The last time Saturn and Neptune came together was when the Berlin Wall fell. So the dissolving of boundaries, the coming down of walls. I do want to say that this is such a long planetary cycle. These two planets only come together every 36 years or so. And in that way, I think it's going to be more like a shift in the ether, a shift in the zeitgeist, a shift in kind of the cultural tone, more so than something that is really personal, unless, of course, you have a planet or an important point in the first degrees of Aries or any of the cardinal signs, especially. But don't be surprised if this feels like a tone, like the bass note changes, the bass of the song changes and feels like it's shifting subtly, but it's not necessarily one personal event that screams out in your life.
Love that.
No, I would agree with both of you all. I feel like there's definitely this this communal felt understanding of like no more spiritual bypassing, no more like fantastical ideological bypassing of any sort. There's going to be, I think, very sobering and clarifying moments that we are all going to be coming to face with in these next few months. And as we work our way through this year, there will be things that clearly put us into action that builds the dreams that we all desire. But I think that there's going to be a lot of like, oh geez, I was watching something with Adam the other day, and then they said that like, oh, we're building something with like the dreamy like waters of Pisces. And it was so beautifully put that I wish I could remember it word for word, but it's just like, we're doing that. But it's like in this, we're fighting for the underdog. We're protecting and leading in the ways that aren't just like self-entitled or self-fueled, but more so like this is the new world that we all have to come together and put forth and strive for and build with intention. There's going to be a lot of like stop and go because we're going to feel this like anxious desire to get it done and defend in a very Aries-like manner. And we're going to be thwarted, I feel like, when we like have these initiatives. A local group here, a few local like chats here were infiltrated by the Proud Boys or whatever. And like groups of people that I know that are part of these chats were attacked and violently, like verbally violently, just like came after because these people infiltrated their chats. And they're gonna create new chats, it's whatever, but it's gonna be a lot of like initiatives started and then something stops it and we have to redirect. And I think that that's finding the stamina within this stop and go process is what we're gonna be really focusing on. And that's gonna be really important for us to get to the goals that we're going to be creating in real time and trying to attain as a communal, more familial society. I think since that's where I genuinely think that we're moving to.
Yeah.
Totally, Q. I like that a lot, and I agree. I was kind of meditating on just this configuration happening at 0 degrees Aries, and 0 degrees Aries evokes for me the image of like being inside of a birthing room, like someone's giving birth. And I was meditating on what does Saturn do in that room and what does Neptune do in that room. And I feel like Saturn might cut the umbilical cord or like do something that signifies separation of the child and the mother. But Neptune might be some kind of spiritual blessing that happens at the birth. But Neptune could also be the separation between us and the spirit world, and
Mm.
all that goes with that we don't entirely understand. We don't know why the soul chooses to come to earth and inhabit the human body. Like, we might be able to get at seeds of that in our human experience, but we don't know all the answers in the earthly form. So I think there's some kind of separation from, yeah, the earthly and the spiritual that happens with Neptune. So just wanted to mention that the birthing room was somewhere I was taking myself to.
Love that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think it was Q brought up spiritual bypassing, and I just prior to us getting together today, I recorded a talk that'll be part of what everyone's watching on the channel this week, on Saturn, Neptune, and the topic of spiritual bypassing. And I covered it from a variety of different angles, right? Because it's a big conversation. But one of the angles that's not frequently covered is that, there's, and I think this is very Saturn, Neptune, and Aries. Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is a really great time to establish actual spiritual practice. And by that, I mean regular, consistent spiritual habits and practices that can then have meaningful dialogue with living a human life. Because as much as I completely understand the conversation about spiritual bypassing, as someone who has had a daily spiritual practice for almost 20 years of my life now, sometimes I get a little frustrated because I see people really going after spirituality with the spiritual bypassing language almost weaponized from people who themselves have no spiritual practices. And so if you don't have a spiritual practice to begin with, what kind of authority does one have to accuse someone else of spiritual bypassing? It would be basically just saying, I'm a materialist and it's better to be a materialist, is really what's being said. Whereas when someone has a spiritual practice and then they have to actually negotiate, what does it look like to not bypass this life in this world while also having a spiritual practice or focus in life? To me, that's where questions of spiritual bypassing become super interesting and relevant, but not from people who have zero commitment to anything spiritual in the first place. That's just materialism. And this is what's so interesting, is that Saturn Neptune is also a contact that can frequently come up when people realize, oh, I need that self-care in my life as a consistent daily habit. That doesn't mean you become a monk, or it doesn't have to look like something super austere, and it's not prescriptive. Like, for one person it might be dance, another person it might be, hey, you know what, I'm going to get back into journaling because it's been years. Wherever you draw from the well, it might look different person to person, but the point is that it's actually really hard to have meaningful dialogue between spirit and matter if we're not prioritizing daily contact with spirit at all. You know what I mean? So I think that's because all of the conversations about spirit and matter really intersect in all these puzzling and interesting ways when the two planets come together. So I've been thinking about that a lot because obviously at Nightlight, one of the contributions we're trying to make is, hey, if establishing a spiritual practice right now, it's kind of like wet clay. Like, just put your handprint in the wet clay right now and you might find that it sticks. So anyway, but these are all valid and different and important ways of looking at the same thing. That's what's so wonderful about archetypes, isn't it? It's like a jewel, and we turn it in different ways because conversations on the ground, on the streets here in where Q and I live in Minneapolis, are also super important and very practical for Saturn and Neptune and Aries, different angle of the same thing. So anyway, on that note, thank you all for just lending some thoughts as we start the conversation. I'm going to turn it over to you guys now as we go through each sign at a time, looking at Saturn, Neptune conjoining in Aries. Today, we're going to have Emily taking fire signs, Mal's got earth signs, Q's got air signs, Kelsey's got water signs. So, and then I'll just add some thoughts as they naturally come up for me as you guys are going, and I'll mute myself in the meantime while you guys are rolling along. So let's start with Aries. I'll circle it on the screen so you can see where that whole sign house conjunction is happening. And And I'll kick it over to Emily to start us off.
Yeah, so Aries, if you're an Aries sun or rising, this is the first house. Everything I just said about this is, more of a collective transit, but this is personal for you Aries out there, right? Because this is the first house of the self, body, character development, your own psyche. And what's really coming up for me with Aries is that this could provide the opportunity for the unraveling or the dissolving or the taking down of labels that you have either had put on yourself and on how you are identified or have been put on you. These narratives or these storylines that we tell ourselves and that maybe are limiting and confine us. This might be an opportunity for Aries out there to have a new awareness, a new imagination around who am I really? I have a dear friend recently who conceived of, coordinated, and executed a huge surprise birthday party for a loved one in her life. And after it was over, she said, I had this realization that all my life I have told myself I am a person who doesn't get things done. I have this narrative and this label that I've put on myself that I don't get things done. But she realized that she got this whole party done single-handedly by herself. And that realization allowed her to look back and find all of these other instances in her life when she got things done. So this is like a little example of what are those stories that you have believed to be how you are identified, the labels that you have that might be coming down, right? And there's something in that is very liberating and also can throw you into an identity crisis, right? This might be a moment of, whoa, if I'm suddenly seeing who I am in a different way than I have long believed myself to be, it can really throw you. So go easy, Aries, if you're having this moment of like, I'm not who I thought I was. I'm not who I've told myself I was. I'm not who other people have said I was. And remember that this is a longer process. You don't have to wake up on February 21st and be like, I'm a whole new person, right? But this does, especially the next couple of years while Saturn continues to be co-present with Neptune in your first house, allow yourself this opportunity to slowly become a new person. Who are you going to be? And imagine that, right? I think otherwise, this might show up with dissolving the limitations in maybe a health pursuit that you are going on. Maybe you're looking towards adding on 5 extra pounds if you do weightlifting and you've been stuck at a plateau and you can't break through. Maybe now is the time that you start to break through that plateau and move forward. Or the development, I think, particularly with Aries, a Mars ruled sign, a fire sign, of anything physical, any physical skill or physical goal that you've had that you might have felt like you're at a plateau with. It's possible that this is a moment when you're able to dissolve that limitation and push through. Word of caution, it's not really a Mars transit, so I would caution more strongly with Mars. It's Saturn, but you could have grandiose fantasies around your physical abilities with this. So just do take it easy. Don't push yourself too hard and then injure yourself. Generally, though, what I'm really seeing for Aries is, who are you going to be? Who are you going to be moving forward? It's time for a whole new you. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, one thing that is, I'm just going to take this banner away from my head for a second. One thing that comes to my mind is also the uncanny way in which unconscious material, things that are invisible, in other words, can suddenly crystallize. It's a very psychosomatic transit where if you are in a pattern of getting irritated by the same triggers, unconsciously, you may find that they suddenly appear on your body in the form of a rash when these two planets get together. It's such a powerful bridge between invisible things and tangible things in the body. So let your body be a source of wisdom right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll move us to Taurus rising, and Mal's got Earth signs.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, Taurus rising. I think you might be kind of a lucky one with this transit in the sense that you're the one who gets to have Saturn in his joy in your 12th house, because Saturn does kind of like to be in the 12th house. It's at least a mitigating factor. We're dealing with a Saturn in fall, but maybe he's a little bit easier in the 12th house, and then joining up with Neptune. I'm thinking a lot about the 12th house and the ancient correlation with exile, and how serious it was for an ancient person to be exiled from their home. And I'm thinking about a lot about that right now. I'm in a foreign country. I don't really speak the language. I could get lost very easily, but in modern times, I have my cell phone, or I could use Google Translate to get out of any sort of exile situation, right? Whereas in the ancient world, being exiled was so much more serious and deadly, and had this faded sense of, all right, you're stuck. So I'm thinking about that exile archetype now being able to come up, and maybe being able to be worked with, especially in the realm of a therapeutic setting. I often call the 12th house the therapy office, because it's where we choose to maybe dive into a fear story, a narrative, or just simply work on something within ourselves that we know it's been kind of hanging out in the back of our minds for a long time. Maybe it's something we've avoided for a long time. And for whatever reason, now is the moment that we decide to kind of go to battle with it in a way, because it is Aries, right? Yet in battling this fear that likely has maybe little characterizations that go along with the exile archetype. Oh my God, what if I'm different? What if I'm different than my family? What if I come out as a witch or an astrologer and my family thinks I'm crazy? What if I come from a very a politically a family that has completely different politics than I do? What happens when I start posting on social media in the completely different tone and my family sees it? What happens with my group of friends when I start to embrace a side of myself that I never have before? There's some opportunity to explore how you are different. Again, going with that exile theme, but also I think a true opportunity to use this transit to gain a new perspective on the self, and perhaps things that have been repressed for a long time. I also tend to associate the 12th house with sleep and the dream world. And just intuitively, I was feeling like if any Taurus risings out there are not getting very good sleep, or have some kind of condition or whatever that is inhibiting them from getting their full 7 or 8 hours, I just had this intuitive feeling that I had to say, um, prioritize your sleep hygiene. Um, do it from a holistic way, do it from a Western medicine perspective, whatever you feel called to. But it's really important as you start to transform some of these very subconscious things that are coming to the surface, getting a good night's rest beneficially contributes to you being able to psychologically process and let go of a lot of the things that you're working towards. I'm even seeing someone building a crystal grid around their bed, or like something that promotes good sleep.
That is awesome. I love that. I was just thinking about the fact that just like 2 days ago, and we're just today on the edge of Neptune entering Aries as we're making this, and just like 2 days ago, my wife had ordered me for Christmas a little red light. You know, red light therapy. Have you heard of that?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
she ordered it for me to use before bed. And I just plugged it in last night, like on the eve of Neptune going into my 12th house in Aries. It feels like a red light. I didn't think about it, but I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. Oh, I love that. Yeah. I mean, it's really cool. It's just like this little light, but you can aim it. And anyway, it's pretty neat. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I also think, as a Taurus rising, I have been, and I think I mentioned this, like as Neptune was finishing its time in Aries before it retrograded back into Pisces, I started taking a deep dive into Buddhist philosophy, just as a curiosity. Like, oh, I've spent so much time with Vedic philosophy, yoga philosophy, Western philosophy, but never really Buddhist philosophy, which is like an offshoot of the Vedic tradition. And I've been spending a ton of time with it. And I spent all of this time with Thich Nhat Hanh over the past couple of months. That's what shaped, along with the Buddhist monks who are walking right now to the capital, that's what shaped my inspiration for the 40-day meditation challenge. Anyway, I think that spiritual activism is a real form of activism that Saturn and Neptune in Aries is sort of already bringing into our consciousness as these monks walk to the capital, and will arrive there the day that Saturn enters Aries. So I think about that for Tauruses too. Like, what is spiritual activism? It doesn't have to be completely different than political activism, but it also doesn't have to be the same. And so that's something that I've found a number of really influential Buddhist monks have talked about. What does it mean to be on the cushion in the street? Or what does it mean to be a peaceful advocate, a peaceful guardian, a peaceful protector? How do you bring goodness into the world? How do you bring the monastery consciousness into city consciousness? What does that look like? Those questions have been so powerful for me. I always think about those questions, but I've been noticing their proximity closing in as they enter my 12th house as a Taurus rising. So I'll add those thoughts in case they're useful for anyone else out there. Okay. Thank you, Mal. That was lovely. I'm going to move us along to Gemini. And Q, what do you got for us?
Ooh, okay. So Gemini risings, this is happening in your 11th house. So this will be affecting your friendships, your alliances, your benefactors, your communities, whatever organizations you find yourself a part of, but also your hopes and your dreams along with your fears. And so it's really highlighting or bringing to light, I would say, just how much you are going to have to step into your most authentic self, and how that will go about affecting the communities that you're a part of, the clarity that you find around who you are and how you express yourself, because we will have your first house activated a little later when Uranus moves into that house. So there's going to be like a sextile happening that really highlights the quirky, weird, unconventional, somewhat debative and contrarian nature of the Gemini energy. And that's going to make some of the folks that you find yourself around or have aspired to be around, it'll ruffle the feathers in that area of your life. I'm seeing Gemini rising speaking their truth a lot more, finding different ways to communicate what their actual stance is when it comes to certain things happening in the environments and groups of people that they find themselves around. I've talked to quite a few Gemini risings, and either in some shape, way, or form, they're like thinking about entering these social platforms, but in a way that is scary to them because they know that what they're wanting to introduce may not be supported, but they feel strongly about it. And I think that that's where a little bit before when I said like you're going to be starting projects and then you're going to kind of feel thwarted by what comes up and what re-steps you might have to take as Saturn makes you go back to the drawing board around these like new initiatives that you want to bring to your communities. You may find that you bring them to your communities and your communities aren't exactly like welcoming of it. With Saturn there, you can really experience a lot of judgment, a lot of like censorship around how it is that you express yourself, what it is that you're saying and how it is that you're moving. Aries does have this very like Mal was saying, it's a severing, it's a cutting off of energies. And so you might find that your umbilical cord to some of these groups, alliances, community partnerships that you wanted to be a part of or found yourself being a part of, if you shift your positioning, and with Aries being there, there could be ways in which somebody else may feel like, oh, you're trying to be the leader. Oh, you're trying to restructure things in a way that works for you. And I don't necessarily agree with that. You're going to be finding throughout these next couple of years just how important it is to be yourself, be as eclectic, as curious, as communicative as you possibly can, but understand that it will come at a cost. But Saturn doesn't make you struggle for no reason. Their suffering is not for nothing, okay? When you're losing these people, other people will come in, other groups will come in, other alliances will be made, other hopes and dreams will come forth that are more crystallized and capable of being built off of. And you'll find the right group of people, the right community spaces to fight for what it is and defend what it is that you deeply care about. And it'll be coming again from a very authentic place. When you enter rooms, you'll be felt. That Uranus in the first house is really going to shift it up for you. So do keep an eye on that transit as well, just because it's like your actual presence will stir up and cause a little bit of like disruption. But if you're doing it in a way that is truly authentic and caring still, because Neptune is still this like agape, lovely energy of like us coming together is not individual. We're all synthesized in this. So it's like you want to be leading from a place of authenticity. There we go. But it's like you're still doing it for the all. You're realizing what your role is and how you contribute in these specific spaces. And you're just doing that at your best ability. And it contributes to the all, which feels really fulfilling to you all. I would assume. I think that a lot of Geminis have been trying to figure out their place coming from that 10th house where these planets were kind of like highlighting for you the ways in which you need to set boundaries maybe around how people perceive you and expect for you to move in this highlighted spot of the 10th house. Now that we're in the 11th house, coming from that, you're like, okay, now that I've set some boundaries around how people perceive me, let me start acting in that. In this truth that I've now recognized within myself. And so a lot of Geminis are like, I'm ready to be around people who get it, who get me, who are ready to roll in the direction that I'm rolling in for the right cause. And so I'm just very excited to see what literature comes from Geminis, what publications come from Geminis, what inspirations and new initiatives are brought forth and built off of from Geminis. They're just like a lot of electrifying energy, I think, with what Geminis will be able to do during this time with this newfound energy of self and how they want to move in these different environments and relationships that they are building for themselves.
That was fantastic. I love that. Thank you, Q. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I am reflecting on there's I'll keep this anonymous, but just there's someone I know, not personally, but someone I'm aware of, whose chart is a Gemini rising, who is right now having to backtrack some things that they said when what they thought was good humor. But they themselves, not just because there was public scrutiny, but they themselves realized wasn't timed right or sensitive. And I can tell because I've followed this person from afar for a very long time. And I've never had any idea what their political inclinations are, because that's not the sphere. They don't talk about that stuff in the sphere. This is a sports world. And it's so interesting to me that I can feel them stepping into an awareness that their role exists there's a Venn diagram overlap that's starting to appear between their little sports part of the world and the bigger world, that they're realizing they might have to be thinking about right now. And they didn't have to before, because there wasn't an intersection out their window. Do you know what I mean? Like in here in Minneapolis. And I'm going like, wow, it's interesting to see a Gemini rising have to reconfigure where they overlap with the collective reality as Saturn and Neptune are ingressing into their 11th. You know, and it's just that. And I'm very gracious and forgiving person. I'm willing to let, if people weren't being malicious or hateful, they just made some errors in how things land or the right tone of voice or whatever, and people are figuring that out. I have a lot of grace for people figuring that out in my life. You know, I'm like, yeah, you know, because there's a lot of people and friends, family, you encounter people that are at different stages of developing sensitivity and consciousness and awareness, and I think we have to have a lot of grace for each other. Geminis right now, you could also find that your consciousness is shifting in terms of, you know, where your social or collective involvement is needed, and what kind of consciousness that means you have to cultivate to be the best version of yourself in different spaces that before maybe you didn't have to have as much leadership in, you know? So anyway, this just comes to mind within my little Minneapolis sports world that I've been observing from a little bit of a distance. But anyway, I'll keep it at that, just to keep, I don't want to drag the drama up. It's just archetypally the situation I've noticed for one Gemini rising. So anyway, thank you, Q. That was lovely. All right, let's go to Cancer rising, and Kelsey's going to take us into some watery delineations.
Oh, yes. Hello, Cancer rising. So I'm thinking about how much soul searching you guys have done with Saturn, Neptune transiting your 9th house lately, exploring philosophy, your higher meaning, probably going through some tests of faith, and really pushing you to mature and contemplate what you want out of life and who you want to be known for. Even if there's been moments of uncertainty, this pilgrimage in your 9th has really led you to this initiation point of how you want to wisely integrate all this wisdom that you've gained and bring form to a vision, really bringing it to life, this new myth that you're catching light of, and really impacting your life's work probably as well, as this is an Arta house that's associated with the work you do in the world and what you're known for. And it's a very visible place. So this calling does feel instinctual and fiery and bold, but it's not necessarily coming from a place of validation from the external world, but more to be a part, an active part in your external world. So you're letting go of maybe certain identities that have maybe kept you from doing that. Maybe certain roles are dissolving so you can step into a new idea of authority, one that's built on a very spiritually motivated calling of some kind, not driven by a need to prove yourself, but a need to recognize yourself in the world, in the work you're doing. So I think this is about embodying leadership in a very Cancerian fashion. So keeping safety and compassion and nurturing at the core of how you lead. And since this is an angular house, the dissolving of boundaries and structures in your public life is going to impact all areas of your life, your identity, your relationships, your private life. And with Saturn here in the 10th, you might be asked to take on some greater responsibilities, maybe before you feel ready. So Saturn will be walking you through a few years of learning that really begin, something that creates a lot more of attainable goals. So something that maybe you'll be learning here through some initial Neptunian fog, maybe of both uncertainty, but also inspiration of where speed checks and reality checks can really help you define goals for yourself, set boundaries in your career, or if you're not working, then with whatever you do in the world that feels purposeful. Excuse me. And also with what's worth sustaining too? What's dissolving with Neptune? And is that okay with you? Can you allow certain things to dissolve so you can occupy other goals? Excuse me. With Mars in Aquarius ruling this conjunction from your 8th house, I think that whatever stuff's going on for you in the Aquarius season, it's untangling you from past attachments and motivating you forward with this initiation point. And as Emily was mentioning, this is a long transit, so we don't need to get it all done now. But whether you're starting your own business or having that idea spark, or maybe you're claiming your place within an industry, letting go of an old role, or starting out fresh on a new path, you want to do this with endurance for that long-term game, with maturity rather than impulsively, knowing that there might be potential consequences of acting too quickly on excitement. And just being very realistic in what it is that you're initiating. So valuing the hard work over the potential success itself. You may also be, with Saturn here, I'm thinking of authority. So you may be challenging previous definitions of authority, stepping into an authority of your own, without the shadow of becoming domineering in your approach. But we know Cancer risings. I mean, you guys are going to bring that compassion, because really that's what inspires healthy leadership, is the ability to inspire others. So I think that's really coming through here, because others may be looking up to you as an authority figure, which can be an honor, but it can also feel like pressure if you're not fully aligned with a deeper sacred purpose in yourself. So I'm thinking about where you can resolve some dissonance between material goals to a sacred calling that's coming from within. Really reflecting on what it means to embody that healthy leadership, not just to the external world, but keeping yourself accountable. With Neptune in the 10th, this can be very glamorous and sparkly, like yearning to be someone or to lead or gain respect and recognition, which isn't inherently negative, but it must be checked. And we know Saturn will do the trick, making sure that it's coming from a place of discipline and true integrity. And Neptune can really dissolve the illusion of status bringing happiness here, meaning that when you chase a goal, you're doing it for the right reasons, bringing Saturn's realism with you, holding yourself accountable to the things that you start. And on a lighter note, I think Neptune can really inspire creative, spiritual aspirations. You could become interested in the creative fields like film, art, visual arts, storytelling, the healing professions. Neptune can really help you surrender to the creative process. And maybe that will help to calm the fires of impulse here, is just letting that intuitive impulse be guided here. I was also thinking about Saturn ruling the 7th and 8th, and how you might need to be a little extra discerning with how you negotiate things, how you form partnerships, and just making sure that you're being very discerning with any entanglements, who you bond and bind with. But also on the other side of the coin, there could be also very spiritually guided unions with others that help you progress in your career with a shared vision of something that you want to really devote yourself towards. With Mars in the 8th house ruling over this conjunction, I think you could be breaking away from a collaboration or from a tie to others' resources, starting out on your own, or facing some deeper fears or psychological themes around being a leader. So this could be very freeing. I know of one Cancer rising in my life who's breaking away from a family business and starting off on their own, but feeling very apprehensive about it. And I just told that person, that's normal with what's going on. And I think it's about allowing that process to play out and just really embodying that independence, and maybe not dissolving specific relationships, but a specific form of relating that ties you to a place of dependency and helps you really initiate into some individuation here.
I love that. Yeah, I wonder been, kind of thinking of these circles, right? And the image of the Venn diagrams. And I'm like, there's an ancient relationship between the 10th and the first house. Arta in the 10th, Dharma in the first. And so the question of where does my true nature play some kind of virtuous role in the world? And Saturn, Neptune in Aries has the potential to redirect that conversation because of the way that your authentic nature is being revealed or called forth through things happening publicly, socially, and collectively. It's funny how certain events in the world act as triggers for the deeper understanding of who we are in relation to it, in other words. And I could see Cancer's really experiencing that. I think about my wife, Cancer rising, who I've known her for many years, and protests have always scared her. Like the kinds of things that happen have always been a little scary for her. And as Neptune's entering her 10th house here in Minnesota, she went out to her first organized gathering of peaceful protesters. That was a lot for her, and I was really proud of her because that was like, I could feel the Aries planets, coming together. She's got 3 planets in Aries in the 10th. She's a very brave person. She's a double Taurus, and so things that feel like they may be unstable, she's a little bit more cautious about. I tend to be the same way as a Taurus rising and find different ways of doing things. Even for me, big crowds are really can be very scary. But there she was, and I thought, well, that's a great example of these planets about to conjoin in her 10th. So for Cancers, it might be about like what calls you forth, or what calls you out of your shell into action. So that's interesting. It's an interesting way of thinking about it. I really appreciate everything you brought to that one. Thank you, Kelsey. Let's move along to back to fire. Emily's going to take us away here. We're going to go into the 9th house.
So 9th house, Adam, you just mentioned that the first being a Dharma house. This is another Dharma house, right? This is about finding truth with a capital T. It's those guiding life principles, the mentors and experiences that help to shape your beliefs, your ideologies. And Kelsey, you just used the phrase, I wrote it down, resolve some dissonance. I love that. And it feels like to me, with this combination of planets in the 9th house, that there may be some dissonance arising in your belief systems. There might be some sense of what I ascribed to and believed is I'm suddenly seeing it with new eyes, and I'm not sure I ascribe to it anymore. There might be, if Aries first house are having an identity crisis, I would not be surprised if some of our Leos are having a crisis of faith around this time, because there may be the coming down of the labels, the narratives, and the connection to what we believe. That could be anything from a political ideation that you've always said, this is, what I believe, and you're seeing it in a new light. And maybe you're like, I can no longer call myself this or that. Maybe it's a person that you have had on a pedestal as a mentor or a guide or a guru. You're becoming aware of something about them that you can no longer hold to. It feels like a moment of striking out on your own with what you are choosing to believe, how you are choosing to align with your principles. And that can feel scary and exciting. And it requires, I love that this like leadership and independence has been coming up throughout as everyone has been speaking, that it requires bravery. It requires like stepping up and maybe it requires the fall of a belief system or a person you have admired, or something like that. I also wonder, with the breaking down of walls or the dissolving of boundaries or limitations, if there isn't, on a mundane sense, maybe you have always wanted to go abroad and there has been limitations to that, like you can't afford it, or you have been waiting for a visa to come through or something like that. This could be just a very simple, like, the way opens for you to be able to take that trip abroad, or the way opens for you to be able to pursue a new field of study, or a new uh, religious, political, philosophical area of your life, that limitation is now gone, that had been keeping you from being able to pursue that. So that is something I see for our Aries. Generally, though, I just that crisis of faith. It feels like it might be scary or destabilizing. Um, but I love for Leos that come this summer, when at the very end of June, when Jupiter moves into your first house, there is going to be this fire trine taking place between two of your Dharma houses. Like, stick with it, hold to the passion, the fire that is within you, hold to the ideal images that are shifting and changing. And then there's going to be the opportunity for so much of this sense of who you are and what you believe to be coming online, and uh, growing with bravery and boldness. So hang in there if for a few months here you're feeling a little bit like, I don't know what I believe anymore, because that can feel pretty destabilizing, that you've got some supportive, fiery, brave energy coming your way throughout the rest of this year for our Leos. Yeah.
I love that. I realized at the very beginning we didn't clarify that this was Leo's horoscope. So Leos who were in the fog the whole time, it was just appropriate that you be in the fog trying to discern truth. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, like I agree with everything Emily said. It was really nicely put. And I guess what I would add to that is selfhood and mission get on the same page, because this is the exaltation of the sun, which is your natural ruling planet. Aries is the exaltation of the sun, where the same planet that rules your own sign of Leo. So I guess the point is that having a sense of mission and purpose and clear vision, that's moral, spiritual, philosophical, that's really important for Leos. And that's why we have that whole sign trine between Leo rising and the ninth Aries. It's one way of understanding it. Even Sagittarius, a Jupiter-ruled fire sign in the fifth, suggests that belief be a part of how creativity is breathed into the world for Leos. So a crisis of faith, a rediscovery or reorientation of faith, a greater defining or directing of your faith-based vision for life seems at hand. And that's the part I'll add, which is really just sort of reiterating most of what Emily said. But yeah, that was great. Thank you, Emily. Let's go on to Virgo, and Mal's got Earth sign, so we're in the 8th.
Yeah, this is quite a conundrum, Virgo risings, because the 8th house is a moksha house. So it brings us into the theme of detachment from the material, yet Saturn wants to build things in the material, and Neptune kind of wants to mesh itself into things. So these two planets make detachment from the material, I think, a little bit more challenging. But I was thinking about just the psychological concept of in your child's development or your own development, we all reach a point in our teenage years where it's time for us to psychologically separate from our parents who we've been enmeshed to for our survival's sake. But now around the teenage years, we're meant to kind of rebel a little bit against our parents because we're trying to learn how to survive on our own. And I'm thinking about that metaphor of kind of like this rebellious teenager entering into the eighth house and starting to act a little bit more defiant against their family or their parents or just the greater material sort of themes that keep them feeling like they're lacking independence. It's kind of like a I don't want to be told what to do sort of vibe. And some Virgo risings could be feeling this as an aftermath of having Saturn just go through the seventh house of relationships. There are some Virgo risings who maybe experienced a breakup or a divorce, and now they're trying to figure out how to become more financially independent after that sort of separation. That could be a real story some Virgo risings are experiencing. Other Virgo risings have strengthened their relationships and the foundations of their relationships, but yet there still is this inkling in the back of their minds, maybe this desire to be self-reliant in some way. Maybe there's a Virgo rising who's trying to start their business despite their financial comfortability between themselves and their partner. Something really is lighting them on fire, to just continue to pursue that energy of self-reliance. Just one other funny thing I was thinking of. I was like, how do I ground this such a complicated energy in the eighth house? And I started to think about the TV show Schitt's Creek, which I think a lot of us have watched. If you haven't seen it, it's just kind of like a sitcom about a really rich family who loses their inheritance, and then they have to move to this small town, Schitt's Creek, and kind of make it there. And they run into all of these challenges. But this show is making me think about this trope of like a rich person who loses their material resources or their connection in some way, and then has to somehow go to the real world and learn to be kind and learn to communicate or make friends or make connections. Like they no longer have access to their privilege. So now it's solely about their personality, and they might wake up and think, oh my God, I have to work on that. Now, again, do I think Virgo risings are going to be experiencing some big loss of inheritance? No, maybe one in a million. And at the same time, there just might be this little a circumstance or just an energy of who would I be if I separated from this maybe this benefit that I'm receiving from another person, this privilege, this realm of my life that does benefit me in a material way, but does it actually help me grow spiritually and emotionally? And sometimes I think the Virgo rising might be finding, no, it does not. Now it's time to maybe untangle myself from it and go my own path. So that's what I'm feeling. That eighth house, though, it's not an easy place.
No, definitely not. Yeah, one of the things I really appreciate about the eighth house Saturn Neptune, because I've been thinking about this through all the houses, have done a bunch of horoscopes on this over the past year, is that first of all, things become strangely literal when these two planets get together. The literal collapsing of the Berlin Wall. It's like how heavy-handed or heavenly script do we have here when literal walls fall apart, when Saturn and Neptune get together, you know? But there's so many literal things like that that can happen, which is why when we're talking about Aries rising, I said your irritation mentally, emotionally can literally become a rash. In the 8th house, what I find interesting is that the emotional tensions, or let's call them the karmic dynamics that are emotional and psychological, can express themselves in and manifest in very concrete ways. This can mean certain power struggles become much more vivid and crystallize in much more concrete forms. So you have to be really careful of that. But any unconscious codependencies can suddenly become very explicit and sort of literal. So the benefit of that is that you can really clearly see the outlines of healthy versus unhealthy karmic relationships, entanglements, attachments, and possibly release them. But yeah, anyway, it's going to be a very interesting thing because so much of the 8th house is unconscious to us. It stands in an aversion to the ascendant for Virgos. And so what happens around that, that conjunction may become like things that are sort of less tangible become sort of weirdly tangible. And I think that's true for the 12th and 8th houses in particular. But anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you. That was brilliant. Let's move on to Libra. And we've got this now in the 7th house, and Q's going to take us away.
Yes. So Libra risings, like Adam said, this is happening in your 7th house. And a good amount of what we were just discussing with the 8th house, this energy is playing into your relationships with other people. It is the reflection and mirror to the self. And so with Saturn and Neptune entering this house of the other, the mirror to yourself, there's a lot of things that will be coming into focus with how you are in relationship to things outside of who you are and who you believe yourself to be. First, with Neptune being there, you might, like Emily said, there could be some fog in the beginning where you're feeling intuitively like there's something a little off. You could have been feeling this energy built up as is, where there's dissatisfaction within this realm of your life. And so with Saturn entering that house and meeting Neptune, it's going to bring about a great opportunity for the right challenges within relationship to show up, giving you the opportunity to address them and clarify exactly what those energetic boundaries are, what your needs are, and how you go after a relationship that feels, in relationships in general, that feel satisfying and revitalizing to the self, the creative self as well. I think that with the Libra Aries axis, there is a lot of self-sacrificing that can happen, or overcompensating and trying to make things over copacetic, where you're now like sacrificing the self. You're not defending yourself. You're not defending your desires. And even if there is an illusionment around, or projections perhaps maybe, that you're putting the onus of your happiness and satisfaction within relationship on other people that you're in relationship with, or other things that you're contracted to, you could realize during this time that, oh, this is actually a me problem. And this is something I have to work on if I want to see this through to the end and get the desired results that I am envisioning from this Neptune placement. But Saturn is not just going to allow for there to be very loose parameters around what makes a relationship, or what makes a relationship comfortable, creative, inspiring, what makes you feel alive in your relationships. A lot of this, if it's been a little wishy-washy, if you've been allowing for the clarifications around definitions within your contracts, within your relationships, within the way that you are just like literally relating to the world outside of yourself, that's going to be a little uncomfortable to continue moving forward in. I think that Libras are going to have a really wonderful opportunity to restructure how it is that they are relating to the other, and it's going to come at the cost of losing friends, of maybe having more open enemies. You might have like some clarifying moments of like, oh, I thought you was a friend. I mistake, you know what I'm saying? Because now that I've realized these desires that I have, these standards that I'm holding for myself, boundaries that I have for myself, I cannot allow myself to continue on in these situations, these contracts, whatever it is that you find yourself in relationship to outside of self. You will find that there's self-work that you're willing to dive into. But when you do that, what comes to you will be so aligned. I think that you'll be able to feel so much more secure moving forward, intuitively knowing what is for you and what isn't for you. So you're not moving from this lack mindset or like over servitude. With Saturn and Neptune having left that 6th house prior to this, there is a potentiality that you're coming out of situations or experiences where you were over serving something outside of yourself, whether it be a career, an individual, your partner, an ailment that you may not have been aware or being able to diagnose before. A lot of these things might come into clarity as these planets make their way into the 7th house, and you start realizing, oh, I don't have well relationship with some of these things, some of these people, some of these ideologies, you know, my visions, my hopes, my dreams has moved into the 7th house, and I'm realizing like I don't have the best relationship to these things. And so it's going to be a little hard, but I think that for our Libra loves, it's going to be so satisfying to feel like your relationships are like your dreams around relationships at that, and your hopes and wishes around them, your spiritual beliefs that you carry behind that will be built on something that feels like it could last the test of time. Where you might feel like that had been lacking before, there was like a lack of direction to take with it. So I'm excited for Libras. Go forth and be great with your relationships, y'all.
Love that. Yeah. I think something that could also happen would be that things that have been unseen, unsaid, felt, but not somehow real become a lot more real. I'm thinking, for example, of, and especially collective overlap too. I can think of one Libra that I know whose partner, her and her partner are on different sides of the political spectrum. Yep. Seems impossible, but actually it's more common than a lot of people would think. And this could be a time where some of the things happening in the collective materialize those differences in a much more concrete and unavoidable way for a relationship, for example. Mm-hmm. But that confrontation could lead to peace and understanding. It doesn't have to lead to separation or divorce or something. So we kind of hold space for things that need to be seen to be met and dealt with in reality, and then for healing or meaningful departures to take place from that point, perhaps. Thank you, Q. That was wonderful. Let's go on to Scorpio. Sorry, where my Kelsey's got water. So yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so
it's all good.
You're good with the, here, I'm going to circle it for you in the 6th.
So Scorpio risings, for us, this conjunction takes place in our 6th house of daily routines, health, hard work, conflict, sacrifice, all that good stuff, giving you a new sense of commitment and sacred motivation for all of your responsibilities and obligations, and not just to your work and devotion to others, but to your own bodily upkeep and relationship to health and self-care. So I wanted to focus and start with the health portion because I do think it's truly vital for the success of all the other potential 6th house obligations, such as embodying more meaningful work, altruism, devoting yourself to an important cause like the healing professions or advocacy or service work. You know, we can't give from an empty cup, y'all. And it's only possible to do this work when we're implementing personal routines that are reliable, sustainable, and energy building rather than consuming or fatiguing. And honestly, I'm kind of roasting myself, you guys, because as someone who works in healing and healthcare and has a lot of different obligations, this is a very practice what you preach moment. And so in order to renew vows to the service you do in the world, the systems of your body really need a new rhythm. And I think this is actually kind of helpful to have Saturn here first in the beginning rather than at the very end, to help you really ground into routines at the foundation. So, how you nurture yourself is really tied to how you can show up for others. And the kind of service that you do cannot be self sacrificing, it cannot come at the cost of your own health. That illusion of achievement is dissolving, no more over identification with how productive you are, with being useful, and ignoring signs of burnout. Since we do have to work to survive in this material reality, we can't just stop working to solve this problem. Some people might have that privilege, and maybe this moment is about letting go of certain obligations that no longer make sense. But for those of us who do need to continue the grind, this means creating more efficiency in the routine, adding things that really lighten the impact, and gentle ways to recharge and discharge energy, taking away habits that burn you out. And if you're, going to start an exercise routine, like, let's not like lift super heavy right in the beginning. We don't want to hurt ourselves. So, yeah, being useful and spiritualizing your work, it's a major part of this conjunction too, but there is a call to show up with more devotion in the world and, with advocacy and care, but it does need to start at the roots. And this cannot be making your identity all about being productive. So I'm thinking about Mars at the roots of the chart in the fourth right now, ruling this conjunction. Major changes taking place subtly in your private life and your relationship to the past, maybe certain endings that are occurring or shifts during Aquarius season that are inspiring new motivations to take care of business like it is a sacred ritual. The mind, body, soul connection comes to mind, really needing to be reinforced through daily commitments, through conscious rituals. And with Aries here, Scorpio rising, we can impulsively start health routines and we're just not as skilled as keeping them sustained. So I think that Saturn's really going to help us out there. And I think Saturn Neptune could be really good for starting or at least keeping up with a morning meditation routine, a yoga practice, something that really nurtures all facets of your being, making exercise a priority by being gentle about it. I think also about some of my Libra rising friends that have put me on to this insight that, it can be hard with Saturn Neptune in the sixth to really pinpoint where a problem lies and what impacts to your health. They may be harder to diagnose or even understand. And I don't say this to fearmonger at all, but I do encourage you to listen to the intuitive signals from your body and answer them with responsible action. I think Saturn Neptune here will challenge you to show up more mindfully in every way in your life, cooperating with reality where certain habits and a lack of routine in general may actually be creating more burnout. So again, roasting myself here, no more running on adrenaline, no more sacrificing sleep to get it done, no coffee all day, more nurturing your nervous system, rest, and time management, really gauging your capacity. Saturn really wants you to stick with your routines so that you can see the results over time. And I also wanted to mention just letting go of control over outcomes in general, because I think when there's a crisis or an issue, an Aries sixth house can be very quick and impulsive to sacrifice balance to solve it quickly, to fight or face limitations with frustration. So this could be about having more compassion with your own process, the processes of others, the peers you work with, and just allowing this area of life to like de-escalate a little bit. And avoiding burnout personally also means avoiding fiery conflicts that burn you out too. More forgiveness, more acceptance. And I do think that I thought it was funny. I catch myself saying this a lot, whether it's something going on in my life or my work life. I say the phrase putting out fires a lot when there's stuff going on. And I remember in July of 2025, when these two came close together, I just thought, I'm not a firefighter. So I don't know why I keep saying this. I really need to focus on letting the fires be a source of illumination for where attention is needed or where attention was neglected. and, not trying to fight it, but to recognize what's being ignited in front of me. So at first, this transit could symbolize a wake-up call to recalibrate, but it's really about setting into motion new foundations for your daily life and making it more sacred.
That was so nicely put. Yeah, I wonder about sacrifice and effort. I feel like questions of martyrdom. That's a heavy word, but it's like, well, what are you dying for? Because everyone's going to die. So, and Scorpios, I don't think mind that truth. Death is real. You're going to die. So, how do you want to die? Do you want to die degenerating in the midst of things that feel like enslavement mentally, emotionally, spiritually? Or do you want to, kind of burn the life down to the ground with things that have a meaning and spiritual value? And that might sound extreme, but I don't think it's too extreme for these two planets. I remember it was one of their configurations that I believe was present when the Vietnamese monk set himself on fire in the 60s, the anti-Vietnam protest. So not that you have to light yourself on fire, Scorpios, but if life is fire, then it's important to think about how you want to go down. The sixth house is like dragging us down into the underworld, and it's that reality that life is always a daily battle against entropy. The dishes being the simplest example in my household to make me feel like I'm already dead because they're never gone, so, but I mean, it's like, well, like I can do the dishes because I feel that I'm serving my family, that's really important, because if it weren't there, I think I don't know. I just think that I'd be miserable, but I can find some way of getting through the misery because there's meaning. So I think questions like that are probably really important for Scorpios right now. All right. Thank you. That was brilliant. I love that. Let's go to Sagittarius, and Emily's taking us back for our last fire sign. Let me circle the fifth house here for you.
Yeah. Woo. Kelsey, that was awesome. My husband's a Scorpio rising, so I was just like listening to that through the lens of my relationship. So for Sagittarius, this conjunction of Saturn and Neptune is taking place in the fifth. And, I actually just pulled up on my phone a Sag rising friend of mine, because we're recording this on the day that Neptune is moving into Aries. Just sent me a text this morning, and because she knows she's a lover of astrology as well. And she said, time to lock it in. And I was like, yeah, it's all about, it's time to reimagine what joy, pleasure, and creativity looks like for you. And she was like, that's what I was just thinking about. It's time to stop dreaming of creating something and just create something. And I think that this little text exchange that I had with my friend this morning exemplifies the potential with the Saturn and Neptune moving into your fifth house of joy, pleasure, self-expression, creativity. It's time to just really reimagine what you want to create, what brings you joy, what no longer brings you joy. Again, the coming down of walls. Has there been a story that you've told yourself, like, this is what makes me happy, this is what makes me feel good? But when you actually stop to check in, is that no longer the thing that really brings you pleasure? Something like that feels like it's on offer here, with a reimagining of joy, pleasure, creativity. Now, as Q has said a couple of times, we might be running into some roadblocks here. So I think, don't be surprised if, especially throughout the next couple of years, while Saturn is co-present here with Neptune, and you're dreaming, if you maybe start something or feel like you're going in a direction, or you feel a spark of initiation around something that you think will bring you joy, if you hit a roadblock or you hit a limitation and you go, actually, that's not the thing, right? Hold on to the creative, inceptional energy of Aries. And if you have that happen where something that you feel at first kind of convicted and driven and excited about falls flat, or you discover it's not what you thought it was going to be, just pivot, right? Pivot and keep searching for your joy, your sense of creativity, and in whatever way that can be freshly, courageously imagined for you. I think also with the fifth house, this could, you might notice this if you happen to be a parent in the life of a child, that they are exploring what brings them creativity and joy and pleasure and romance. This might be the opportunity for the softening of boundaries or limitations between a relationship with a child. Maybe if you have been estranged or something like that, or had a difficult relationship, this could be a moment of some reconciliation, some resolving of dissonance. There's that phrase again, Kelsey, that could be happening with a relationship with a child. Or conversely, this might be a moment where there needs to be a rupture of some kind around how you are relating with a child, or a child of your heart, of your creative impulses, right? So if this feels like a reimagining of how you're relating to your self-expression, your joy, your creativity, the children, literal or figurative, of your heart that you are getting out there in the world. And yes, keep the curiosity, keep the initiative, keep the impulse and the courage and the bravery if you're hitting roadblocks, or if something that you are pursuing falls flat, or a door closes with joy or romance in your life. Like I think it was Q, you also said Saturn doesn't say no for no reason. Saturn doesn't bring you challenges for no reason. It's so that you can grow, or so the door can close so that a different window can open, right? So keep that in mind, and keep your heart enlivened and emboldened, and just pursue what brings you joy, and get out there and create something. Just Aries is so, especially first degree, and Adam, you talked about this recently in one of your episodes, I think, but that first degree being such a degree of simultaneous creativity and destruction, like all in once, in one moment, like the universe is born of chaos, right? Or that kind of thing. So just hold on to that sense of creativity, even if some things need to fall away in the process.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about how if you're a Sagittarius and you have been waiting for a creative impulse to find the right form, this could be really good for, I think of myself as a writer, and I have an idea, but I'm not sure what form it ought to take. Then all of a sudden, maybe the first part of the form takes shape and you just follow it, and then the rest of the form emerges. That strikes me as the kind of process that Neptune and Saturn conjoining in your fifth could bring. There's also potentially very powerful shifts of your consciousness or awareness that could come through your children. Whatever they are, whoever they are, parenting and the intersection with your child's fate or dharma and your own could be a big part of this one. Yeah, that was great. Thank you. I love that. Let's go on to Capricorn. Mal's got our earth signs, and I'm going to highlight the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the fourth house.
Yeah, well, Capricorn rising, the fourth house is the place of the home. So perhaps you are moving into some sort of houseboat. Just kidding. But I think we could actually think about building something on water. And it's a little bit of a conundrum, but we do see this in nature. Actually, the beaver builds the dam on water. So it's possible that we could look to the beaver as our maybe Capricorn rising mascot for the next 2.5 years or so, while Neptune and Saturn are co-present in the fourth. How do I build a foundation that moves with the waves instead of building a foundation and getting frustrated when it doesn't work with the waves crashing against it? It's like, oh, I almost would be better off just building something with a little bit more flexibility than getting so rigid with how the structure is supposed to be. That comes to mind. And maybe there are some Capricorn risings who really are building a house. Maybe you're designing and constructing your own dream home. And there are some challenges that are popping up with the pipes, with flooding, with the structure. But also think about that metaphorically too. How do I build my structure just in a more flexible way, which isn't necessarily easy for Capricorn. Capricorn rising, you're really good at building things in a structured way. So to now have to build something foundational with more flexibility intact, it's a new skill that you're developing. I'm also thinking about the fourth house in terms of the homeland. And now we kind of have that exile archetype in the place of the homeland. So maybe there's a growing feeling of being displaced or misplaced, or nowhere quite feels right to put down roots, yet to be human, we have to put our roots down somewhere. I'm thinking about two Capricorn risings that I think are a good example of being like exiled in the homeland. And one of them is Prince Harry, and the other is Colin Kaepernick, both who kind of display a sort of life situation where they're feeling either at war with the homeland and needing to leave, or at war with the homeland and needing to stand up for some kind of injustice, greater injustice. So there could be a feeling, I think, for the Capricorn risings, whether it's a micro scale, like it's happening in your family home, or more of a macro scale of your community, your place in the world. There could be a feeling of fighting a battle at the homeland, at the home front, and that being sort of disorienting and uncomfortable, but maybe ultimately needed in this moment because you're learning how to build something with more pliable wood, if that makes sense. Like, I guess wood is breathable and bendable in some situations. Wood doesn't always have to be so sturdy. So I'm really interested with how this is going to play out for the Capricorn risings. One more thing I was thinking about is the last time Saturn was angular for you was in 2018, 2019, 2020. That's when Saturn was in Capricorn. And now Saturn's kind of starting to square that story, I guess, that developed in the first house back in 2018, 2019, 2020. So I would journal actually about what happened during those years and maybe thinking about how that might relate to some kind of point of initiation and crisis. Think first quarter moon vibes, but maybe of Saturn in a way in your chart. Yeah, that's what I've got.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I forgot for a second where to find my mute button. Whoops, let's take that away from my face too. You know, it's interesting because my wife's an herbalist, and we were talking about flexibility and adaptability with trees. And there's an herbalist that she likes that explained, he did this presentation, she was telling me about it. And it was all about how wind makes the stalk stronger. That was the gist of it. And wind is what also gradually builds up the thickness of trees. It's an integral part of it. Like, you can't separate the rings of thickness in trees from the invisible presence of persistent wind. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And just kind of taking that to dovetail off from what Mal was just saying, the forces of evolution are always driving us towards something irreducibly soulful, but it's always happening through the persistent rush of experience that's causing us to both adapt and change and grow in our consciousness. You know, so that image to me was just really rich. I really loved that, Mal. And then just as it applies to the fourth house, we're talking about our base, our foundation. So some of this work might be about adapting at the base. That can be family karma, ancestral healing work, your living space and how it heals or serves you, adjustments that have to be made there. And it's also about what is in your private life. Like, for example, this is something that I just realized for myself through a transit to so my ascendant ruler is in my fourth house, and I had a transit to my ascendant ruler in my fourth house, and I became so aware of some of the private level of my experience, much more internal than what I show in the way. Your ascendant, very it's not a fake, like some people call it a persona. It's not fake. It's not just a persona. It really is you, but there's also a very interior space that very few people have access to. Maybe a therapist, some of it your spouse might get, or a very close friend, but it's very private. And I was like, I absolutely hate and am so deeply irritated with people leaving the lights on in my house, because my girls are just light bandits. They run around turning on lights, they leave them on, they don't turn them off. And then they love to talk during movies. They cannot make it through. And like, granted, they're like little kids who are trying to figure out what's going on. And so they ask a lot of questions. That is really funny because, like, as I had these perpetual transits to Venus in my fourth house, I was like, oh, I don't tell anyone ever about the things that really annoy me or irritate me. Because I don't want to seem selfish, or, you know, like, I don't want them to have to, like, I don't want to be an inconvenience. I'm a Taurus rising, and Venus is my ruler. Like, I don't want to disturb people, but God, I find these things so annoying. And I wasn't even aware that that was part of my inner life. It was so quiet. It was so invisible to me. And all of a sudden I became aware of them. And then finally I got the courage to speak up. And it was really funny. My family thought I was holding this like death summit to give them the news that I had cancer or something. And I was sitting them all down to tell them how deeply it bothers me that they leave lights on. They are much better at it now, but it needed like this very serious. They were so like, wait, you're going to tell us about lights? This is really serious for lights, Dad, you know? But that's it. That's the fourth house space. It can be really simple stuff that's on the interior, but suddenly it's very clear and it's very vivid and it crystallizes. So watch for your light problems. I'm just kidding. Okay, that was really fun. Thank you for that. Let's go to Aquarius.
All right. Yes. So Aquarius, this is happening in your third house of mind, communication, environment. It is a place of immediacy. And so as Neptune makes its way into this house, you could be feeling some mental overwhelm for sure. Definitely mental fog. It's can be confusing, I think, at first to really get a handle or a hold of something that is so slippery and not tangible. It is literally our projections of our like visions and dreams and like just imaginations, our creative ability to imagine images. And so how do you grasp something that is so mentally fueled? I think Saturn moving into this house and like joining Neptune will provide clarity and help initiate that ability to build off of the thoughts that are coming more and more into clarity and form as you work through them. Definitely, like we've mentioned before, these are long transits. So definitely make sure that, or like the energy of them will be long standing as these planets make their way through the third house. So definitely give yourself time to start a new way of thinking, begin a new way of exploring the way that you think and you move in your immediate environments. This is a house of siblings and, family members. So you could see that a lot of these new forms of thinking and ways of thinking and the clarity that you're getting around your processes, around how you understand your world, could change the very environments that you're used to, like just moving within day in and day out. And that's going to then create its own plethora of thought processes that you would have to work yourself through. So definitely give yourself time to not get into the mental overwhelm that, air signs can find themselves in. But I think particularly Aquarius is, I like to try to be a little bit more understanding of the fact that you're Saturn ruled. And so there's an extra rough and tough way that y'all can get into y'all thought processes that feels a little bit more suffocating. So it's like with Neptune allowing some brevity here, some looseness, lean into that to be creatively curious in the ways that you restructure your way of thinking. So if you have like a tough inner critic, you know what I'm saying, with Aries there, that's giving very like militant, coach, that drill sergeant is like, you talk to yourself, you're like, buck up, you can do this, be courageous, be strong. And it's just like, okay, well, let's add some soft understanding, some compassionate understanding, loving, just nurturing, like really healing, not so much avoidant. We're not trying to avoid certain paths of thought or move in illusions around our beliefs and our understandings of what our environments actually are. This is more so to shed a light on like what structures within your thinking processes aren't the strongest, and where they can be foundationally worked on in order to build a world, an environment, spaces that you find yourself in with family, siblings, just your day-to-day, where you are creating something from your thought processes that go into action, that transform into action, that is inspiring, creative, thought-provoking, and catalyzing the change that is necessary for those around you, but also yourself. With this just being a lot of Aquarius energy, Saturn is ruling your first house as well. So a lot of this is going to be directively feeling like it's like affecting you. It's going to be more than just like, oh, well, these are my siblings' problems, or like, oh, I only like see them here and there. Like my thoughts on this isn't important. No, your thoughts on this is going to affect you personally, and it's going to feel more personal. So definitely, like I said, allow for things to be personal. Aquariuses can sometimes like push it off of them and give the onus to like that Leo energy, but allow yourself to sit in this light, to shine that light on aspects of your mental space that could be strengthened and some more supportive of who you are, but also, again, your immediate environments. You will find that you may have innovative ways in which you want to communicate these thoughts and new understandings that you're having that, again, protect yourself, defend others, that really tread a new way of being in leadership that doesn't feel penetrative and just destructive and chaotic. I think that in the beginning, your thoughts can feel quite chaotic as you're trying to grapple and figure out and categorize and fix everything into place. There's going to be a need for flow and release, and then allowance of things to come in as well as you're releasing these other ways of thinking and therefore moving that might have not been helpful to you in the past. So as like these, like Adam has mentioned a couple times here, there's going to be clarity, and especially with this being the house of the mind, this clarity is going to be super important with how you actually structurally build your tangible life around you. And a large part of that is going to obviously affect like your faith, your beliefs, your philosophies. That axis is going to be really highlighted during this time for you. But if you're doing it from a self place, that first house again, a place of like, and your 12th house also is ruled by Saturn. So a lot of that 12th and first house will be at play here in being highlighted and helping initiate your ability to continue to work through your thought processes, but then do something and build something off of it. And a large part of that will have to be part of your own self-undoing. Again, if you have a harsh self-critic, inner self-critic, a way of speaking to yourself, take this time to journal, to find ways to, like Kelsey said, like softly, compassionately exert this like mental exhaustion that you might be experiencing, trying to work through these rapid thoughts and understandings that are coming into crystallization in real time as we're working through everything that's working around us. But I think that it's going to be a very innovative time for Aquariuses. For you Aquariuses out there who like to speak your mind, just make sure you know you sitting with your mind, you working through the thoughts that coming through your mind before you share them out. Like Adam said, our air signs, it's a time to speak up and be courageous about what it is that you speak up for, but just make sure that you're not just like slash and dashing and just like blowing the spot up for no reason, when there can be some compassion, care, and actually healing and imagination imbued into these experiences, whether it's with your communities, your partner, your relationships, or with self, that mental space. Make sure that you're doing so in a way that is regenerative and healing and just abundant. You know what I'm saying? There's this very the possibilities are endless, right? Your thoughts are endless. What you can build from those thoughts can feel like expansive, but you got to make sure that you're in the right mental headspace before you just go out there and say things. The memorial that I went to last night, there was a guy there on the speaker, and he was saying things, and then he says some other things that I felt like divided the space a little bit. And I understood what he was trying to say, but then you pinpointed certain groups of people who are in this space trying to contribute, who see themselves as part of the whole, but in your communication to defend something, you isolated them and you made this a divisive situation. I think that we can find that being a lot of the over-occurring thing where people are thinking they're speaking out and trying to say the right thing and defend the right thing, but realizing that it was actually quite divisive, and there's just like a need to pivot and go back to the chalkboard as far as like, okay, got what you were doing, but like impact versus like, or intention versus impact, huge. So really just think, I think, take your time to process your thoughts during this time.
That was so nicely said. Yeah, I mean, our Aquarians, I joked on today's episode that as we're recording this, there was an episode that dropped on Mars. We're kind of at the heart of the Mars-Pluto dynamic as we're recording this. So we always record a week in advance. And I jokingly said we've been in an Aquarian mosh pit. It's with the planetary lineup there. And it's funny because there are Aquarius risings, that's been in your own psyche. You know, it's been like straight up in your face. It's happening inside of you. So with Neptune and Saturn conjoining in the third and Mars still finishing up in your first, I would really tap into like, what are those practices of peace? Because you've got a real charge and there's somewhere it wants to go and maybe something it wants to do that's important, but how it's done is always the most important. Good ideas with a crappy tone of voice don't get us very far. I can say the most honest, true thing to my daughter, but if I say it with shame or condescension in my voice, it's not effective. You know, it's like that kind of stuff where if you're practicing self-care, the power of what you have to say and what you're here to do right now can be that much more effective because it's coming from the heart. And the heart leads when we take care of it and put it on the altar every day, however we do that. So that would be my encouragement, because it's some fire coming through the mind and coming right through your words and your acts and your intentions, with Mars in your first at the same time. Thank you, Q. That was just beautiful. All right, let's go to Pisces. Last but not least, Kelsey's gonna bring us home.
All right, Pisces risings. So Saturn and Neptune have left your first house. The fog is lifting after a long journey of self-discovery, self-development. Now it's about self-reliance and survival in the material world. In Aries, I'm thinking of Saturn Neptune as a kind of muggy humidity that still brings in that feeling of uncertainty and exhaustion, kind of like this Piscean fog, but with more heat to push forward, more of that cardinal energy to take action and initiative here. Like when you're super hot and you just kind of got to do something. I was thinking about also starting a fire. That's one thing, but also keeping it burning and tending to it is a whole other game. So I think it's important not to jump too quickly into things without tools or planning needed to sustain your inspiration, because I think the inspiration will be strong. And I think this is a process we're all going to be learning together during this Aries reset. But if anyone is familiar with Saturn Neptune, it would be you, Pisces rising, having just graduated from Disillusionment University with your thesis, I Am Real. And with this renewed self-understanding and dissolving illusions and tests of faith, now you're feeling that need for the wisdom and courage to impact how you handle second house themes. Now that I am real, I need to stay alive. I need to survive. So second house being an Arta house of material gains, possessions, assets, security, all the things that bring you sustainability and support, safety, ultimately so that you are feeling comfortable being alive in the material world. This is not just about financial resources, but also the resources of your own time and your energy and skills. So with Neptune there can be some doubt. There can be some spiritual or creative skills as well that you're feeling inspired to monetize or utilize in creating your life sustainability. Ultimately, this conjunction, I think, is a wake-up call initially to reinvent the way you approach survival and self-reliance, letting go of old ways of conceptualizing money or material gains in honor of a more spiritual relationship with abundance. And I think Aries in this area of life is indicating an individuation process, knowing that whatever you start out off on a new path or new direction, there may not be a defined map or a plan that ensures certainty. But in doing so, it's because of this deeper call within to trust your own instincts. And with Saturn here, it's a need to develop patience, to have this support build over time, to build trust with your instincts and your intuition. And really, this just involves making and keeping promises to yourself. So I'm also thinking about fears around the mindset of scarcity. With Saturn ruling the 12th and Mars in your 12th house through transit right now, ruling this conjunction, you could be going through a lot of deeper, more existential battles behind the scenes, triggering this initiation point, maybe cutting away at patterns that are operating in your blind spots. And maybe Neptune can help you dissolve some of the lingering fears and facing them with spiritual resilience and belief in your abilities to persevere through challenges, through setbacks without giving up completely. And I think of this quote that I often say to my patients a lot: never confuse a single defeat with a final defeat. That's F. Scott Fitzgerald. So I think that's really important here. And in some cases, being more realistic about what's possible to sustain or what feels too energetically expensive is implied here. And speaking of expenses, you may have to also be a little more careful with resources, paying more attention to your resource of time, energy, and attention, more discernment and decision making when it comes to finances, maybe reconstructing a budget or a structure to your income, creating a new income stream as something else dissolves and falls away, or maybe just adopting a more minimalist lifestyle, getting rid of things you don't need, really keeping an eye on where you have boundaries here in this area. And as this initiation begins, I think it's about asking yourself about what really makes you feel secure, where impulsivity and the need to individuate with more softness, more reciprocity with others as well, some level of realistic consideration and patience on how you are resourcing yourself. Maybe there needs to be changes there so that you can generate more energy to work and survive. This could be something as simple as making some changes to your diet, or shifting the source of what or who you rely on to feel secure. If there's any element of needing validation that needs to actually come from within, where are you looking for support and why? And of course, we all have very real needs for developing material stability in the world on so many levels. This is necessity, sometimes an unfair one with injustices and social hierarchies of earning. So really, this could be about zeroing in on what matters most, refining your aims. With the 11th house ruler, Saturn, there could be some spiritual and creative collaborations here, having a shared mission with a group. And also with Saturn, again, the connection to the 12th, really bringing in a mental and emotional health component here to resourcing yourself, letting go of addictions or fears around independence, and letting go of patterns that maybe contribute to that self-undoing tendencies that we all have, taking the time to sit with disillusionment feelings when it comes to material goals, and just implementing more spiritual practices and solutions to that feeling of isolation, and just shifting it into, okay, I'm going to use my time alone for more discipline and devotion to develop something that I am creating for me. So that's what I've got for my Pisces risings, and congrats on your Saturn Neptune, your graduation there. Quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see, just see what kinds of stories are coming in from the second house, because I find there's a lot of houses where the kind of otherworldliness and the coming of intangible things into tangible forms makes a lot of sense to me. The 12th, the 9th, the 8th, etc. There's like places where it feels really obvious, and then there's the second house where I go like, well, it's just a strange planetary combination in a house of things like material assets. But what it does bring up for me is the exploration of how much is enough. There's going to be there's a lot of questions that could come up that are deeply spiritual. I remember, I'll tell you guys a story. When I was a kid and Saturn, Neptune were conjoining in Capricorn, my dad got a raise and a promotion to a new church as a minister. And over many years of growing that congregation significantly, it was one of the fastest growing churches in the United Methodist Church in Minnesota. And he was just a dazzling leader. But he eventually asked for another raise many years later after all of this success. And not like a massive raise, just like he hadn't gotten one. So he just wanted a raise. And the congregation said, not the congregation, but this small committee of very conservative people in the church said, no, the money will take you off the spiritual path. You'll lose your spiritual center if it becomes about money. Well, easy for them to say, as my family sat closer to the poverty line than any of them. Do you know what I mean? Because preachers don't make a lot of money. And so anyway, we were lower middle class, and all my dad wanted was just a little bit more ease to not live so hand to mouth, so to speak. And it was no, because money is evil. from people who had money. You know what I mean? So the hypocrisy, and it really was frustrating for my dad. And it's what caused my dad to leave that church and seek another promotion in a different church. Now, paradoxically, in that next community, not only did it come with an increase in pay, but it came with a massive increase in responsibility, more like managing a corporation because of how big the church was. And it completely overwhelmed him. And he has often said, in hindsight, in some ways, I wish I would have stayed because, well, the pay was great and it made things easier. The jump up to managing like a small corporation instead of a church, like, killed his spirit. But do you see how all of those stemmed from Saturn, Neptune, and that those two planets, which were concressing at the time all of that happened, with the second piece, Neptune anyway, on his ascendant. I think about that a lot right now as I'm thinking about this for Pisces, that questions about spirit and matter concress around money. It's like, it's so, I cannot stand it when people say that if you have money, it means you're evil. It absolutely doesn't. But it could, you know. It also isn't out of the question that moral degradation and wealth and greed are associated, you know. So it's like, what is spiritual stewardship of success look like financially? That could be a question for some Pisces. What does it mean to have a spiritual business? That, I think that's legitimate. What does it mean to need more because you feel like you're constantly living in scarcity mode? So what changes do you have to make so you don't have to deal with that and not feel guilty that you have to make maybe some compromises that make your life a little bit easier? On the other hand, you know, like, maybe there's a shift of values materially that's taking place. So yeah, it's a powerful combination. And I suspect that, you know, that Demetra George once said that she thought that the second house name, the gate of Hades, because planets are coming out of the underworld here. And the fact that Jesus in the scriptures references that exact same name in the Greek, when talking, I think it was to Peter, saying that you'll be the rock upon which I build the church, and not even the gates of Hades will be able to disturb its foundation. And Demetra speculated that maybe that was an allusion to the temptation of wealth and greed and money on behalf of the church. I was like, whoa, that's deep. It was a speculation on her part. It wasn't like a hard claim or anything, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's like, these are deep perennial questions around money and faith, spirituality, value in the material world. So it'll be interesting to see. Pisces, you'll have to tell us your stories. Anyway, that takes us all the way through. We did it. I think this was good. A longer episode for this particular month felt right. So we took you on a long journey, but hopefully a good one. I want to tell you how you can stay connected to all of these lovely astrologers. So I'm going to start with Kelsey. Kelsey on Instagram is at MetaNovaGirl, and then astrologyrx.com, like the little retrograde RX, astrologyrx.com. Kelsey, anything you want to promote?
I actually just did a podcast with my friend Elle over in Australia. You can find that on my Instagram in the link. And just readings, guys, big year. I'm here for you, but I will not burn myself out. I will have boundaries, but yes, open for readings. You can sign up on my website, astrologyrx.com.
Absolutely. Thank you. Q, Instagram is at Sensual Noir. And that is where you can also, in the bio, find all of Q's links to booking readings, everything you're up to. Q, anything you want to plug?
Yes, bookings, and that link in bio. And then definitely we'll be having some wellness events coming up in the springtime. So if you're local, keep an eye out for that, because we're trying to get the support out to the community, making sure we're all well.
Yeah, absolutely. Q, sometimes we see Q at our meditation meetups on solstices and equinoxes. So, you know, we might all cross paths at some point there too. But anyway, yes. So Sensual Noir on Instagram, everything Q is doing is awesome. let's go over to Emily at Emily T Astrology on Instagram. Lots of good content being produced there regularly. And then it's emilytatimer.com is the website where you can book readings, see everything that Emily's doing. Emily's been a reader for us in the clinic. Awesome. Can't recommend her enough. Anything you want to plug or promote?
Yeah, come over to my YouTube channel at Emily T Astrology, the same as my Instagram handle. Launched that in December, so putting out weekly episodes there. So come on over and subscribe and like and do all of those things. And yeah, readings also. I really cut my teeth with the reading service through Nightlight, and it is what I love to do the most. So come see me.
Nothing but good feedback from the many people who got readings from Emily through Nightlight last year. And I forgot the YouTube, so it's the same as the Instagram handle.
Yes, Emily T Astrology. Yep.
Okay, perfect. And then Mal, you can find at _Mallory Hasty on Instagram. Mal, I saw that I want to say you're teaching a class, or maybe you just did at Kepler. Or is it somewhere else?
You know what? I gave a talk about planets in detriment, but through OPA.
Oh, that's sorry. It was OPA. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. So that talk is going to be live soon. And yeah, if you want to check it out, you can join OPA's mailing list. And we kind of got into some of these detrimental planet themes, and yeah, it was fun.
Mal, what else do you have going on? Anything else you want to point people to?
Well, I'll just quickly point any European listeners who might be interested in going to an astrology conference. I'll be speaking at the Stockholm Astrology Conference at the end of February. So if you're close enough to Stockholm and you're interested in attending an astrology conference, it will be all in English. Come and say hi, and I know the person who runs it. She's awesome. And yeah. Very cool.
Always doing such interesting, good work, all of you. And I'm so thankful that you're here. And that's a big part of what we're about at Nightlight, is trying to use the platform at this point to support growing astrologers who are putting out good stuff, and try to give them a boost and help grow the field. That's a stewardship piece of work, I think, that's important for us as we grow as astrologers. So we're trying to do that at Nightlight, and we really appreciate all of you coming on and just illuminating us every month. So it'll be fun to get back together again for the month of March. There's certainly going to be a lot more to talk about. We're going to have coming up in the spring, we're going to have Uranus getting closer to Gemini, and then lots more astrology as the year rolls on. So we'll leave you all here for now. We hope you're having a good day, and that you'll have a wonderful month of February. And we'll see you again next time. Bye, everyone.